Hey, welcome to Pete and Draw and Tom. Today I'm going to show you over the next 10 minutes or so how I build my little plein air painting panels that I use for my mini mint tin plein air paintings. You can see here a finished one that I'm using as a template to draw some guidelines for cuts I'm going to need to make. I'm using some scrap plywood. This is, you could use any scrap wood that you'd like, but I like using 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch plywood. And these generally will fit well within the mint tins if they're cut to anywhere roughly around 2 inches by 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 inches or so. That'll give you just enough surface area to fit within the lid of the mint tin, and you get to benefit from all the wonderful benefits associated with doing these sorts of paintings. So I'm going to go ahead and use my miter saw to make these cuts. When the work gets repetitious, I'll speed up the video. But I'll end up making, I believe it's about 23 or 24 different panels from this scrap wood that I'm using. And the total elapsed time for the work that's done here, which includes the measurements, the cuts, the sanding, the layering of gesso, letting it dry, sanding it again, putting another coat of gesso, and then letting it dry and sanding it again, all is done over the course of a 2-day period, and the total elapsed time is probably about 3 hours, if you count the work that I'm doing, actually making the cuts and so on and so forth. As usual, take all the necessary safety precautions when it comes to using power tools and using chemicals associated with paint materials that you might use to seal and cover your panels. I'm using acrylic gesso, and I'm generally going to be doing it out in the open. So here I am. The first series of cuts are done, and the first round of sanding is underway. So I like putting usually 200 or 300 grit sandpaper down on a flat surface, and I'll use that to kind of grind down or sand down any of the rough edges, any of the sharp corners, and we'll also sand down the surface, the flat surface area as well, in hopes that it might help the gesso bind a little bit better to the surface. So I'll make my way through all of these little panels. It is a little bit of a challenge because they're so small, and it is a little repetitious, so you do want to have a good block of time free in order to get this sort of work done. So I'll speed up the video once again, and we'll make quick work of this here. Now, when we're done with this sanding, we will go ahead and lay down a little scrap drawing board made of scrap plywood. We're going to use this to protect the decking that I'm working on here in the backyard, right behind my garage-based studio. And we're going to line up all these little 2 inch by 3 1/2 inch panels, and we're going to line them up in a row, or a series of rows, and then we'll break out our white gesso. Again, it's acrylic gesso, and we will use a sponge brush to go ahead, a little craft brush, to put a nice even coat of gesso across the front surface of these panels. Now, I've been making a lot of these little mini mint tin plein air paintings. I have a whole series going, mostly completed here locally where I live in the Poconos, but I also have a few out that were completed out in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., and we'll just keep rolling along with these. They've become an integral part of my creative process. It's one of the linchpins within my creative process because I have a system set up that's easy to manage. It allows me to take small pockets of time and use those small pockets of time to create beautiful little paintings and learn along the way, as we always do when we paint out in nature through direct observation. And that's really what plein air is all about. So here is the gesso. There's my brush. I'm going to go ahead and get a nice thin, even coat going on all of these panels all at once. And then once we get this done, I'll move the panels indoors just so no debris falls out of trees or the roof gutters and that sort of thing. we don't have any little animals scampering across them. We'll go ahead and put those inside in the studio once we get this initial coat of gesso on, and we'll let them dry overnight. Then basically the same process will unfold minus the cutting. So we'll let this dry overnight once we get this coat of gesso on all of these panels. And then we'll sand them, put another coat on, sand them again, and we'll be ready to go after some additional final preparations. For example, we use double-sided Velcro tape to fasten these panels to my handheld mint tin easels. And that just makes for a nice sturdy connection to the easel. And also it makes it easy to detach the painting from the easel when it comes time to do so. And I could reuse the easel that way as well with future paintings, just by replacing the other side of the Velcro tape affixed to the blank panel that I might be using on any given day. So we're making some pretty good progress here, about a little more than halfway done with the video, and just about halfway done with the process of creating these mini mint tin plein air panels. Pretty straightforward and easy, just a little bit of elbow grease, as my grandpa used to say. And if you're willing to do the work, you can have some nice little uniform plein air panels ready to go. At a moment's notice, if you have an opportunity to paint, they'll be there waiting for you, so you don't miss out on those opportunities to get the work done out in the field. So here we go through the magic of video production. We're on day 2, and the panels have dried. So I'm going to go ahead and just gently sand with a little bit of a finer grit sandpaper this time around. We're going to go ahead and try and ensure that there's no large bumps or divots or ridges in these panels, albeit sometimes those will lend to some interesting effects when we do find them when we're actually working on a painting, and the brush scrapes across some ripples. It does create some interesting effects sometimes to our advantage, sometimes not so much. But we'll try to make them as smooth as we can. And once we wrap up this round of sanding, we'll put our final coat of gesso on our panels. I will tell you, when we create larger plein air panels or panels that we might use in studio, we do tend to put 3 or 4 coats of gesso on those larger boards. In this case, due to the fact that the surface area is relatively small, the coat that is going on with each coat here is a little bit thicker relative to the size of the panel surface. So we're just going to do 2 coats. And here we go with that second coat of gesso. Once we get this done, we'll let it dry. It'll just take a few hours for it to dry pretty thoroughly in most instances, unless you're in the middle of a humid summer day or in a climate where there's high humidity. Sometimes it'll take a little bit longer. But we are in early spring here in the Northeast, and it's a pretty dry couple of days that we're living through. So this gesso will dry within a couple hours. We'll be able to do the final sanding, and then we could actually use these panels if we wish to, but we'll have some final preparations as mentioned earlier by adding the double-sided Velcro tape. All right. So here we are, we're back, and they seem like they're dry. So we're going to sand them a third time. The first time we sanded them, there was no gesso on them. We had just made the cuts. The second time we sanded them, we were sanding our first coat of gesso to make sure it was fairly even. And now we are on the third round of sanding after the second coat of gesso has dried. A little bit of a repetitive process. It's not rocket science. It's just a matter of having a decent level of comfort with the process itself, and then you can execute it regularly to make sure that you make the most of your painting time. And that is key to this, and that's a big part of the reason why I consider these mini mint tin plein air paintings to be a real integral part of my creative process, because I could pick them up and go. My bag's always ready. I'm always armed with a few of these tiles ready to go and some of the mint tins and my paints and brushes and so forth. So if there is an hour or so of free time, I can go ahead and get a painting done. And that's invaluable. So here we have the double-sided Velcro tape. As you can see, we're just going to match up the opposite side as to that which I have in the mint tin so they connect and stick together. I'll apply that to the back of each panel. And then we have a detachable panel here that will fit snugly within the lid of the mint tin and also withstand any of the friction and jarring from my brush as I apply the paint, or if the wind should pick up, it'll securely be held within my handheld easel there. And it also doubles as a wet panel carrier too, which is kind of nice. So I just make sure that I remove my palette liner when I'm done with the painting, shut the lid, put it in my pocket, and walk on back to the car, and we're good to go. So that's it. That's the process for creating my mini mint tin plein air painting panels. I hope you enjoyed and found this helpful. Please like and subscribe.